Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining me. I'm Israeli government spokesperson Raquela Karamson, and today is April 18th, day 195 of the October 7th war. 195 days on, more than 6 months after the horrific October 7 massacre, our resolve to ensure that justice is served remains steadfast. Our top priority, bring our hostages home to their families. Destroy Hamas's terror army. Ensure that Gaza never becomes a threat to us again. As our Prime Minister said yesterday, and I quote, "The Hamas terrorists sought to uproot us. We will uproot them and deepen our roots. We will build the land of Israel and safeguard our state," end quote. After 6 months in Hamas captivity, our hostages, including citizens of the US, the UK, Germany, and 20 other nationalities, have never once been visited by the Red Cross, and we have never been informed as to their conditions. This is a clear war crime, a daily war crime. This is not just our citizens, these are your citizens, and the entire international community must demand their unconditional release from Hamas's terror army. Turning now to the north overnight, IAF fighter jets struck Iranian proxy Hezbollah targets in Kahim, Kfar Kahala, and aerial defense systems in northern Baalbek. Yesterday's serious Hamas attack of anti-tank missiles and suicide drones from Lebanon hit Israeli communities in northern Israel. 6 of our soldiers were severely injured, 2 moderately, and 6 others were lightly injured. IDF fighter jets also struck Hezbollah in Naqoura and Yarin in southern Lebanon. On Iran, last night the Prime Minister, after his meeting with British and German foreign ministers, had this to say, and I quote, "I thank our friends for their support in defense of Israel, and I say support in both words and deeds. They have all kinds of suggestions and advice, which I appreciate. However, I would like to clarify, we will make our decisions ourselves. The state of Israel would do whatever is necessary to defend itself," end quote. No country in the world would tolerate such repeated threats to its existence or allow its citizens to live under constant threat. Turning now to an update from our battle to defeat Hamas in Gaza. The IDF eliminated yesterday terrorist Yosef Rafik Ahmed Shabbat from Hamas's military intelligence wing. His elimination significantly damages Hamas's organizational capabilities. 10 additional Hamas terrorists were also eliminated yesterday by a precise intelligence-directed airstrike on the vehicle they were traveling in. Turning now to COGAT, which of course coordinates humanitarian aid into Gaza. Yesterday, 342 aid trucks went into Gaza, including 17 trucks via the new northern crossing. Additionally, 104 packages were airdropped over northern Gaza. And I also want to draw your attention to the Ashdod port in Israel, where for the first time since the government's approval, 8 World Food Program trucks of flour entered Gaza yesterday. Finally, I want to share with you that the Prime Minister and the government have approved a $19 billion shekel plan to rehabilitate the Takuma region in the south of Israel. The strategic 5-year plan aims to rebuild, renew, and grow the South, the area affected by the October 7th massacre. That brings me to the end of today's briefing. I will now be happy to take your questions in the chat. Do remember to put in your news outlet along with your question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. First question from David Clement from the News Forum. Qatar's Prime Minister has suggested that Qatar is rethinking its role as a mediator. If Qatar pulls out, what will that mean for the process of having hostages returned?
Thank you for the question. I think, that's the question should probably be addressed to Qatar. However, I will say our priority and our goal here is to return our hostages to their families. So whoever the mediator may be is less relevant to us. We will come to any negotiating table and do whatever it takes to return our hostages home to their families. Thank you.
Thank you. Question from Dan Williams at Reuters. Has the attack on Iran been postponed until after Passover?
Thank you for the question. What we saw last week on Shabbat, after Shabbat here in Israel, was an unprecedented attack by Iran, and thankfully, we were able to defend our borders and our nation and our people. And it is now up to the Prime Minister, the War Cabinet, to decide when and how to respond. Thank you.
Second part of the question from Dan Williams. Would Israel be willing to cancel the attack entirely in return for reduced Western pressure about the planned Rafah operation?
As I said in the briefing, no country on earth would tolerate over 300 missiles aimed at their civilians. No country would tolerate that. So it's up to the Prime Minister, as I said, and the Cabinet and the government to decide when and how to respond. Regarding Rafah, as we've said from the beginning of the war, achieving total victory in this war is our war goal, and that means entering Rafah and destroying the remaining 4 Hamas battalions that are in Rafah. So we will enter Rafah. Thank you.
Thank you. Question from Fred Ager from Interplanetary Television today. China and Indonesia's Minister of Foreign Affairs told reporters that China and Indonesia share the same view about the importance of a ceasefire and a two-state solution after a meeting in Jakarta. If nation states, the UN, the EU, and other regional intergovernmental organizations start to recognize officially a state of Palestine, but not the US and other Israel friends and allies, will Israel have to revert to implementing the Oslo Accords that were previously signed by Israel?
Thank you for the question. We are in the middle of a war right now with about 133 of our hostages, our citizens, still in Gaza, still held by Hamas's terror army. This is neither the time nor the place to be discussing statehood after the attacks of October 7th. So that's our position on it. Yeah, like I said, this is neither the time nor the place when Hamas, Iran's proxy, is still actively saying that if they have the opportunity, they will do another October 7th. So again, not the time, not the place. Thank you.
Thank you. Question from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. There are reports in Arab media that the US gave Israel a green light to attack Hamas in Rafah in exchange for holding back from large-scale response to Iran's attack on Israel last weekend. Are those reports credible? And secondly, does the focus shift now to Hezbollah, which seems a more immediate threat to Israel's security?
Thank you for the question. As we've said all along, Israel is prepared to defend our nation, our borders, and our citizens on all fronts. Regarding Rafah, we have, as we know, the Prime Minister has set a date and we will enter Rafah, and we appreciate any American support in understanding our goals of this war, which is to achieve total victory and make sure that Hamas does not pose a threat to our people. In the north, we have been receiving almost daily attacks by Hezbollah, another Iranian proxy, and we will definitely need to deal with that and push them back and make sure that our over 60,000 of our citizens who have been displaced from their homes in the north need to be able to return to their homes in safety. So we will definitely need to deal with that. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Second question from Fred Ager. This April 17th, the first wave of Hezbollah rockets successfully evaded IDF radar systems and hit a community center building in Arab al-Aramsheh in northern Israel, hurting 18 civilian Israelis. Given Hezbollah's arsenal of 150,000 weapons, does Israel intend to launch a ground operation in Lebanon to eradicate Hezbollah's military after Pesach? And would such a ground operation in Lebanon mean that Israel would have to officially declare war with Lebanon?
Thank you for the question. Like I just said, we have been for months now on the receiving end of almost daily attacks from Hezbollah in the north. And their strategy is to try and overwhelm our defenses. So imagine in your countries, any of your countries or any country around the world receiving daily missile attacks against their citizens in an effort to overwhelm their defenses. However, as the Prime Minister has stated at various times, Israel is strong and we are ready to defend our people and defend our borders whenever and however necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the last question.
Thank you all for joining me, and I'd like to say a happy Passover to everyone celebrating here in Israel and around the world. We will see you next week.